Dumelang he bagaeso ke magauta ona wa ko bathong. Ke itse ka jeno come rain or sunshine ke tla be ke le mona mo Katlehong ko ward 50 mo ke batla ho tlo expose di nonsense tse etsahalang mona. Bona fela hore o jwang pelaka. Bona go ditsila jwang. Bona hore batho ba tsamaya mo strateng kore ha ona direction. Batho ba rona ba sotleha. Kore ntho tse ba di etsang di a bona wala hore ha di right for bophelo ba bona. So nna ska magauta wa bathong party ke tlo lokisa nthona tsena tsa mona tsa Katlehong ko ward 50.
Welcome, rain or sunshine for Magauta on Batung Party. They were out there campaigning, doing their door-to-door campaigns, and we'll bring you a full version of that door-to-door campaign. It's a bit late, about 15 minutes late, as we start Elections 360 following that ordeal that took place at the IEC's National Results Centre earlier on with the substation blowing up, and we had to move all our operations and come back here to Auckland Park. But thank you so much for still tuning in to SABC News and joining me here on Elections 360 as we try to bring you the build-up to the local government elections. Quite big on the show this evening is a focus on Brand IEC and how Brand IEC could have been tainted leading up to the local government elections. You also remember that there was that Constitutional Court judgment that was handed down where the IEC said, listen, let's postpone the elections to next year. And of course, that was following that commission of inquiry that was done by the former Deputy Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, Dikgang Moseneke, moved the elections to 2022. But the Constitutional Court saying that the elections must go ahead. Of course, that also led to the IEC misinterpreting that Constitutional Court judgment, and then remember what the Democratic Alliance accused the IEC of being in bed with the ANC. So we're focusing on the Brand IEC this evening and also the build-up to the local government elections, considering that such a short space of time that political parties as well as independent candidates had to come up with a campaign and make sure that they try to woo you ahead of the November 1st elections. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And remember that the conversations continue on the social media platform using the hashtag Elections360. And speaking about the IEC, let's start off here. It's been an audacious journey for the IEC as they try to fulfill their key mandate of delivering free and fair elections. Many hurdles had to be overcome to reach this point, the COVID-19 pandemic being a major concern, and the Commission found itself running back in between courts to reach the finish line. Noma Bolani compiled this report looking at the timeline of the electoral process.
As with almost everything else in our lives today, the COVID-19 pandemic threw the planning of the local government elections into disarray.
The minimum requirements for what constitute free and fair conditions may be different from the standard we apply during ordinary times. Therefore, the Commission wishes that to benefit from an independent evaluation of all the factors which have a bearing on the possibility or otherwise of free and fair elections.
The Moseneke inquiry ruled out going to polls until next year.
We conclude that it is not reasonably possible or likely that the local government elections scheduled for the month of October 2021 will be held in a free and fair manner as required by the peremptory provisions of the Constitution.
The matter was then taken to the country's apex court.
The Constitutional Court has ruled that the 2021 local elections should go ahead as planned by no later than the 1st of November. This has left some parties like the ANC, the UDM and the PAC at a disadvantage as they failed to submit their full candidate list before the IEC deadline of the 23rd of August.
A judgment welcomed by political parties, but the issue of the candidate submission deadline still loomed. The ANC, the UDM and other candidates had failed to submit the nominations lists on time. The Commission's decision lending some saving grace.
We will have to republish a new election timetable. And in terms of that election timetable, there would have to be a new candidate nomination closing date, together with other processes that underget the election timetable.
These elections have followed an unprecedented process characterized by a lot of back and forth. But the Commission says it's ready for Monday's polls.
We have sought to prepare for this election with diligence within the constraints of time and the constraints imposed by COVID-19. Yet we are reasonably confident that all measures necessary have been put in place to realize an election of the standard contemplated in the Constitution. To my colleagues, I say, we dare not fail. To my compatriots, the clarion call is the moment of vindicating our electoral choices for the reconstitution of municipal councils is upon us. Let us seize the moment by voting on the 1st of November 2021.
Well, now let's cross to the National Results Centre in Pretoria, where the operations have been limited after that power outage. The IEC says this was caused by part of the substation being blown up. Due to safety and security reasons, the centre was evacuated. Joining us now outside the Results Operations Centre is international news editor Sophie Mukwena. Sophie, just quickly tell us what the situation is like currently.
Yeah, as you are aware, Aldrin, that we were supposed to come live from the Results Centre, the show Elections 360 Degrees. Later this afternoon, while we were busy preparing, we suddenly lost power and we kept asking, and we were then evacuated, and we were told that the section where we are, where you have the IEC supplying power, doesn't have power. Earlier we were told that it is a problem generator, but we have since heard that it is a substation near the IEC that blew up. But with me I have the head of SABC Resource, Khutso Matlala, who has been speaking to the IEC and people who are involved, who will share information in terms of what transpired. Khutso, thank you so much for joining us. What happened?
Earlier on, as you had clarified, we were in the building and then we were told to evacuate because there was an issue, and then we did evacuate. We lost the lights inside, and then we were later informed that the transformer, which is situated inside here, inside the IEC showgrounds, has an issue, and as a precautionary measure they had to shut down that power so that they can fix the problem. We were initially told that it's going to take an hour to be sorted, but it's been about 2 hours, I think, since that issue happened.
Well, Khutso, should we have similar problems going forward, because we have a fully fledged studio here and most of the programs are going to be here? Do we have plan B in case we have a similar problem? Because if it is a transformer, I can't see a transformer being, the municipality being able to deal with that problem within a day or 24 hours. What are we going to do going forward as SABC to ensure that we continue with our work as we are doing now with all the contingency plan?
Yeah, if it is an issue that's taking the time that it's taken now, we will make the plan that we just made now, but clean it a bit up. Maybe a plan B is to just have a studio outside where if we are evacuated, we are able to broadcast. Because this issue does not affect the SABC at all. We are completely independent with power. We've got our own generators which are running. Our studio is actually lit inside. But the technical team and the editorial team that were on site were quick and were thinking on their feet to make this plan that we are making here. We've actually set up an entire broadcast in a few minutes with the spares that we could find that were outside, because we were still not allowed to fetch anything inside of the building because it was dark at the time. So this would be a plan B, but a lot cleaner maybe, and using our Auckland Park studios as we are now. Aldrin had to go back to studio and form part of this broadcast. So plan Bs are there, just need to be cleaned up.
Thank you so much, Khutso. That was Khutso Matla, head of resources at SABC News. And Aldrin, you left and quickly you were at the SABC headquarters and you were able to start the program, even though we started late. And I want to apologize to our viewers in South Africa, on the continent, because we are broadcasting to 50 African countries, and also those who are watching online and digital, across the oceans. We really have to apologize, but Elections 360 continues, and enjoy the show.
Well, thank you so much. That Sophie Mokoena outside the Results Operations Center of the IEC, the headquarters in Pretoria. Let's just quickly bring into this conversation political analyst Susan Boyson, and then a bit later on we'll be in conversation as well with Dr. Zwakala. Susan, thank you so much for making time for us. Looking at this particular situation that we're currently facing with the electricity element, which almost seems to be one of a crucial element coming with even the election campaigning for political parties.
Yes, it's challenged only by Eskom, and it is indeed a very strange situation, but all credit to the SABC for thinking on their feet. And indeed, I'm sitting here in one of the SABC units on wheels, and yet it's a crisis for the IEC, and certainly one wonders how operations are going to move ahead, since the heart and nerve center locally of its operations are right here, which is being evacuated. But SABC is certainly continuing with the show, and no sense of crisis or panic, but it is indeed a crisis.
Yeah. And what is it about this particular element that deals with the issue around electricity that makes it a crisis? And one of the other issues is that, remember when we had that press briefing from the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, earlier on this week with the CEO of Eskom, there was, of course, an assurance that there will be no blackouts, and there will be no load shedding. But there's also now this particular element. And remember during that press briefing as well, Pravin Gordhan saying that there are external elements that are also contributing to the outages, and the director then later on explaining issues around cable theft, although in this particular case, we haven't really found out as yet what the main issue is.
Yes, Aldrin, it's so difficult to speculate about this because we do not know what the exact cause is. It could simply be ordinary maintenance and wear and tear. But one would have expected that, given this important operation that's run from here, that there would have been extra care taken of good maintenance. That said, accidents can happen. And one would definitely not want to go onto the worst kind of scenario option of saying, was there any human elements involved in this? But that certainly with security operations, and right on site here at the IEC, we have seen very stringent security operations all around, even more than I had seen here in previous elections. So a lot of care seems to have been taken, and yet we would really like to know what the cause was, because economic sabotage and political sabotage are phenomena of our time.
Dr. Zwakala also joining us for this conversation. Thank you so much for making time for us. We were supposed to speak about brand IEC and looking at what has happened throughout the days and the months leading up to the local government elections. But here it is, we also have now faced a crisis that the IEC is facing. And as Dr. Susan is saying, is that, listen, there should have been contingency plans being put in place. Just from a brand element, does this at all taint the brand IEC, that an expectation that there should have been backup plans, but certainly not now?
Yeah, hi, Aldrin. Look, the IEC is a critical stakeholder in democratic order, constitutional order, right? So their practices, their ethics, their moral compass, it's pivotal to advancing our democratic ideals as a democratic state, right? So any uncertainty or any doubt in their practices will certainly cause reputational damage to the institution and to the brand IEC.
And let's quickly touch on that reputational damage. The Constitutional Court judgment that was handed down earlier on this year, where we heard the Constitutional Court saying that the local government elections must go ahead, but then the IEC then misinterpreted that order and allowed for reconstitution of the entire timetable, allowing parties such as the ANC and other parties like the UDM who who had not met the deadline, with some of the candidates being allowed to now re-register those candidates. What do you think that has done to the brand?
Aldrin, I lost the first 10 seconds of your question. I caught it. Look, it really questions their impartiality, right? Because, one of the values is to conduct free and fair elections. The Concord by no means suggested that this was an opportunity to open up the list for political parties. Again, as I'm saying, their impartiality has been really questioned, and this speaks to their ethics. How independent is the IEC really? And I'm not sure if I've got the answer to that question, right? So they misinterpreted the court order, and that causes doubt. And the danger of this is that certain political parties may just question the election outcomes based on the misinterpretation by the IEC.
Okay, and Dr. Susan, you have Dr. Zwakala speaking here about political parties, seeing the IEC probably to be biased, but then the other part around it is the electorate themselves, because they too have to believe that the process leading up to the elections has been free and fair.
Yes, indeed. That's such an important part of the process. And it remains very contentious that to the extent to which it was a misinterpretation or not. There was a preliminary order and judgment by the Constitutional Court with very sparse details. The full judgment was not issued at the time. And I think in those circumstances, actually, the IEC took the best decision that was possible. Yes, it did definitely advantage the ANC in that ruling, and a few other political parties as well. But it helped ensure in a big way the general legitimacy of the elections. It is a reality that the ANC would have been included in quite a number of municipalities where it had not altogether, but where it had not nominated all of its candidates across all wards or on both lists. But that was widespread, sort of around 95 municipalities. And it would have meant that there was serious illegitimacy to much of the elections. And it would have raised the question as to the extent to which general population would have found the elections acceptable going ahead. So it was a contentious interpretation at the time, but we must remember that opposition parties, of course, also saw the opportunity in there to make a lot of propaganda out of it, and they gained a lot of very wonderful publicity in that process. But I do not think the IEC in that decision itself suffered a lot of damage. And one must have in many respects sympathy with the IEC as well, because they managed to pull off still these local elections in conditions of pandemic. And when I started, for example, commissioning former Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke to do that investigation and report, at that stage, there was no idea, a reliable and no consensus idea, how the pandemic would be playing out. And nobody would have been able to nobody was able to accurately predict that the pandemic was at this stage at a likely low between waves, which makes it ideal for now that the IEC actually did reasonably well in putting this off, despite these hiccups. In pandemic conditions, nothing was going to be simple.
Yeah. And then with that is the one part, Professor Boysens, where you speak about how, for instance, where the IEC has had to put the elections together, of course, during a pandemic. But the other thing that we witness is that we are experiencing the shortest election cycle that we've ever seen in terms of the campaigning, that within 2 months, political parties had to spring into action, roll out their campaigns, roll out their manifestos. What do you make of how quickly political parties were able to do that?
Yes, it was in many ways quite impressive how they pulled it together. And it was a period of very intense democracy. although political parties are very likely still to challenge many aspects of the process, also because it was so condensed and they could come back and claim that this or that was unfair. I believe the IEC is quite used to dealing with political parties through their party liaison committees, etc. So that part of it will probably be handled. What I was impressed with was really the extent to which we had as a period of hyper-democracy in South Africa. So much accountability was extracted by more than 300 opposition parties across South Africa, and from the ANC, which is the predominant governing party. We have seen so much of the lapses and failures of service delivery and governance in general that was exposed in this period. And we have seen the ANC exceptionally issue a series of apologies, which are still ongoing, and also putting or promising to put corrective measures in place, like in a barometer on service and governance and behavior by councillors. There's a change in legislation that has been signed, which will all help bring in more accountability. And that is really, for South African democracy and the vibrancy of political parties and opposition and civil society organizations generally, that really brought so much accountability in a period of campaigning, which was at a maximum around 6 weeks. Yeah. And that is good democracy, actually.
Yeah. And Dr. Zwagala, then on the other part, there is the small political parties and their brands being able to be resilient during such a short space of time to try and woo the electorate.
Look, Aljan, these small brands, they remain relevant because there's certain corners of society that really a sense of relatedness, a sense of resonance with these small parties. For instance, I can mention a few. Look, the IFP, they've got a rich cultural history, tribal history, if you like. You've got the likes of UDM, a breakaway from the ANC a long time ago. Look, we've seen what's happened with the other breakaway parties from the ANC, right? I mean, I can mention the likes of COPE, who are barely making it. So there's really, I mean, if you talk about the Freedom Front, these parties, they really relate to certain sections of our society, and they're very important for our democracy. Look, they know that they won't govern any city or any metro for that matter, right? But the point is, it's finding that point of relatedness, as I say. Is there someone that you feel that represents you? Be it National Assembly, be it provincial or local government. So they remain resilient. They remain very important in our society.
A campaign, for instance, that comes from the main opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, that says that don't vote for small political parties. It's a waste of your vote. Look,
in my view, Aldrin, look, the DA appears to be very confused party, right? They appear to be very incoherent from within, okay? And the messages that they're sending out there, to the audience are very incoherent. They're yet to address the race issue. Yes, I would have mentioned this to you before. I think under Helen Zille, she tried to address this thing, and she really tried to reposition the brand to be sort of representative of the audience, right? Because what you see from the DA, what you see in National Assembly, is contrary to what you would see in mass rallies in townships, so on and so forth, right? So I'm predicting that the DA will lose a number of votes. Yes, they'll retain City of Cape Town. They'll still lose from a percentage point of view. I don't see them going back to a coalition in Nelson Mandela, nor in Tswana, right? Because they're just not a believable brand, unlike the likes of your UDM, a very small party, but believable. Your IFP, very small to an extent, but they're really a believable brand. They stand for the heritage. They stand for the history of where they come from, right? So we'll see what happens with the DA, but I don't see them gaining at least any voters as far as outcome is concerned.
Okay, Professor Susan Boysens, do you agree with that sentiment? And just quickly on the campaign that the Democratic Alliance is pushing that says that don't vote for small political parties, it's a waste of your vote. Would it make it any difficult for the Democratic Alliance once they are faced with a situation where you have hung municipalities where the vote and the support of small political parties becomes even more crucial?
Yes, this is fascinating times for the main political parties in relation to small political parties. I will refer back to the DA in a second, but I found it very interesting that the ANC itself was also cautioning, campaigning to voters not to support small opposition parties, because we know both they are different scales, but both the ANC and the DA are not growing parties at this stage. They may still recover political support here or there, but in general, they're not growing. And the DA definitely has been losing support recently, as we have also seen in opinion polls, to the Freedom Front and other smaller parties, and Action SA, of course. And that is a big source for concern. And it is very interesting that the ANC then, also not necessarily growing at this stage, more likely to be on a lower end and losing some support, with a host of very small parties all over the spectrum. So many new ones, more than 100 new ones contesting than they were in 2019. And much of the dissent, dissatisfaction with ANC, as we've also seen expressed when senior ANC leaders have been visiting the communities, there are strong possibilities that dissenting voters who want to participate in the elections and yet want to punish the ANC, that happens in all elections, that they, in larger numbers, may be turning to these small political parties. And therefore, it is a threat. And what it means for governments and coalitions, these parties could often help.
Okay, Professor Susan Boysens, unfortunately we have lost the feed to you as well as the audio. We're going to try and re-establish that. Let's go to a quick break, and then after that we'll also go back to the IAC's Results Operations Centre in Pretoria. And welcome back. Let's quickly go back to the IEC's Results Operations Centre in Pretoria, where our international news editor, Sophie Mukwena, is standing by. Sophie, you have an update for us?
Yes, indeed, Aldrin. What I can tell the viewers is that we are standing here on the other side of the IEC Center at the entrance, and that's where you have a generator, as you can see in the pictures there. That is the generators, but also behind those generators you have the transformer that posed challenges to us when we were supposed to do our work earlier on. We are told that the electricians are here, the engineers are here, and they are working on this problem. We spoke to the IEC official who is currently in a meeting where they are looking at reports from provinces in terms of their special votes. He indicated that indeed it was a problem of a transformer. As you are aware that most of the events, venues that are being used for events have not been operating for quite a long time since COVID-19. It is the same here. You'll find that some of the facilities here, it has been a long time since maintenance was done, and it speaks to the problem that we have now with the transformer. There hasn't been a maintenance for quite a long time, and therefore there was this problem. But electricians and engineers are here from Tshwane. They are working on this problem. Back to you in studio, Aldron.
Well, thank you so much for that update. Of course, it's the build-up to November the 1st, that is the local government elections, and we're Sophie Mukwena's reporting from live from now. That's where we all will be based at come the 1st of November. Various SABC shows that will be coming live from the National Results Centre. Let's move on to this story, the party performances during the election seasons. But before we get to that discussion, let's check out the final push for parties which held their rep rallies yesterday.
We are ready. We are ready. We are ready. We are ready. Hurry! Once on a march. Get set. We on a march. Come on. Once
Well, the final push from various political parties ahead of the November 1st elections. Let's just quickly conclude our conversation with Professor Suzanne Boysens. Prof, just quickly in conclusion, how would you characterize these local government elections? And I was just saying now, looking at all the visuals of the big political parties, including the IFP, of course, and how many people they were able to come to these final rallies. And some people asking the question, like, oh, what happened to super spreader events?
Yes, that is a big question. And it is possible, of course, that those kinds of events are with us and that we are just not realizing at the moment. But so far, so good. And we have seen that the numbers in some cases have been exceeding, but there have been these festive atmospheres that law-keeping forces, law oversight forces certainly have not been enforcing very stringently. Probably also because there would have been accusations of clamping down on activity and dampening freedom of expression had that been happening. So these have certainly been very extraordinary election campaigns being done in pandemic conditions, fortunately in a dip between the highs in recurrent waves. And we can only hope and trust that it will not be at the beginning of further super spreading peaks in our health situation regarding the pandemic. So it is, given the conditions and pandemic conditions, it certainly has been interesting and surprising that there was still so much festivity and so much opportunity to do the campaigns.
Yeah, and also there's also, of course, that possibility of a further hard lockdown, as we were told that we will be facing that fourth wave. Thank you so much for your time. That is Professor Susan Boyson. And remember that the professor will be with us throughout our coverage of the local government elections, including when those numbers start trickling in from November the 1st. I hope that you will be going out to vote, and perhaps you may have caught the wind that Batung Party was breaking the 48-hour rule by continuing to campaign. Its leader, comedian Makhauta, went on a door-to-door campaign in Katlehong on Gauteng's East Rand this morning, and you know we had to catch up with him.
Hona jwale he ke le Magauta le team yaka re ya ba kena re kena house to house re lo campaigna door to door go re batho re ba lata mo baleng teng mamela ke puti ikama lami o Magauta ne ke tswa ko Batung Party batho ba ke tsamang le bona ke batho ba ka ba re etsang sure hore re batla ho le etsetsa nonsense mo locationing electricity teng hona jwale abuti o khona ugesi
awukho
uyenze njani
bathwambile ngisola ungekho mina
uhanjiswe yini load shedding angithi awunayo inkinga ye load shedding. This is one of the things tse ke buang ka tsona bona ena ke nonsense eyona ha se nonsense ke nonsense bona bana ba dlala mo and this thing is exposed electricity bona it's raining and ke tsona runa dintho tse re tlo di lokisang as batho. Kopa o etsa sure hore ha o votela bathong ne o ska ntibala ke Magauta ke tjena ha ke bua nonsense. Danko viva Magauta viva
Magauta
ni re ka wena yimini ma problema ya wena lo
ya ileswi swi lavaka lazi ni kinga Magauta we azi xavisi vazi loyo ino
hayi uta votela bathong e tla dila na hore wena banga ku loyo ke so nka o etsetsang papa ku rekele eng papa birinyana kapa o batla eng
no ungathengeli mina wabona njengoba ngihlala la eKatlehong usenzele la eKatlehong ukhombisa ukuthi vela uzimisela ukuthi usinakekele
so mama ungakhona ukuthi uvotele iBathung nge-1 zaka November.
Oh yang recruiter
ngiyakurecruiter mama mara ngizokwenzela into ezi right owampaliya so he bana be ska nna ke tswa ko Bathung le ya believe hore ska ke le clean so nka le dumella hore ho be dirty so nna ke le clean dinana hore ha le nshebile nka khona hore ke le tshintshele Katlehong e be ntle e tshwana le nna le lona le ka votela just for change fela hore ke le bontshe hore nka le etsetsa nonsense.
We can vote. We can give you a try.
Ha o fihla mole go ballot papering o thola Bathung kopa o kenye X ya hao next to Bathung. Viva Bathung viva 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 Bathung viva Bathung. Danko.
And Viva Batung Party Viva. So make sure that you go out on the 1st of November and go and make that X. And if you have applied for your special votes, remember that you can also go and you can go and place your votes, make your vote rather, tomorrow. That is for those who have registered for the special votes, today being the first day of those special votes. Thank you so much for joining us this evening on Elections at 360 Degrees. And again, apologies to our viewers following that outage at the IEC's Results Operations Center. We had to bring our operations back here to Auckland Park, but thank you so much for choosing us this evening. Totsiens, enjoy the rest of your evening.